69% of employees say their manager has more impact on their mental health than their therapist or their doctor. And so if you just map that out into the world of leadership today as we know it, only 15% of managers ever get any formal training. We're putting the mental health of people at work in the hands of people who barely have any training. I truly believe so much growth is waiting for you on the other side of that difficult conversation that you are currently not willing to have. But ultimately, the difference between being nice and kind is the difference between working for short-term approval or working for long-term respect. And if you want to earn that long-term respect as a leader, you have to stop being nice. No one cares as much as we do. It's just the truth. It's so the truth. I would never expect anyone to care about my business as much as me unless they own 50% of it. Whatever we feel the most insecure about, the most vulnerable about as a leader is often the thing that makes us so special and unique.
Welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to episode number 287 of Starting the Conversation. I'm your host, Alice Benham, and this week I am very excited to be joined by the incredible Heather Elkington. Welcome to the podcast.
It's a blooming honour. I've just had shivers as you were saying that because I've listened to your podcast so many times. Have
you really?
Oh my God, yeah. Course launches, like hiring, all sorts. So it's nice to sit and hear you say those things.
Oh, bless you.
In real life.
Wow, what a full circle moment for the both of us, because I was just saying to you before we hit record, the episode that we're about to record today, the conversation we're about to have, is one that I've wanted to have on this podcast for such a long time. And I cannot believe that in almost 300 episodes, there's still topics relating to business that we haven't yet covered. Mm-hmm. So as people would have guessed from the episode title, today we're going to be talking all about leadership as a business owner, managing a team, hiring a team, all of the complexities, fears, feelings, thoughts, questions that come around that. Heather, you are an expert on this topic and the only person I could think of to come and share. To give people a little bit of context if they're not familiar with you already, what career history leads you to being sat here today speaking about leadership? I'm sure that we could do a whole episode in your journey about your journey on its own, but give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour, so to say.
It's a great question because so often I'm on stage and sat in front of lots of generally men, decades and decades older than me, and I have to start with the question, I know what you're all thinking, why on earth is this 20-something-year-old woman stood on this stage talking to us about leadership when we've got decades of experience? My career journey began, I'm going to start right from the beginning, when I was 15 to 17, like going through the end of school into sixth form, I was a workaholic. Like an absolute workaholic. I was obsessed with the idea of just financial freedom. Paying for my driving lessons was the first thing I was obsessed with. I'm one of the youngest in my school year, so I was like, as soon as I turn 17, I want to do one of those courses where you pass in 6 weeks. And so I just got a bit obsessed with the idea of working and the working world. I had 3 jobs through my A-levels. So I was working in a shop part-time, I was working in a restaurant waiting tables, and I used to give up my lunchtime. So when we had like lunch at school, obviously, I would give that up and the free period afterwards to go and serve my friends pasta. If anyone had Pasta King at school, I was the Pasta King.
Shut up. Why was it so watery, Heather? That's all I need to know.
That is my fault.
Oh my gosh, what a throwback. Wow. So you were like, I'm going to give up my free time and I'm going to serve the pasta to
£7
make money.
an hour. However many years ago, £7 an hour was crazy. And so happily, I just saw it like stacking up and I thought I was the bee's knees because I actually had money.
Were you a spender or a saver? Like, what motivated you to have money?
Saver until I got to uni. And then I found plenty of things to spend it on. The main motivation I remember being just independence. I really wanted a car. I really wanted to be able to drive. Really wanted to be able to buy clothes. Like all the things that 16-year-olds think about. And that was it, just having independence, financial independence. Was a workaholic, went to uni and worked full-time whilst doing a full-time degree. So I went to Newcastle Uni and studied business management, which is a complete coincidence because what I do today has the degree has no relevance. It sounds relevant, but it has no relevance. In a business management degree, you learn a lot of theory, a lot of organizational theory from the 20th century through to the end of like the 1980s. You hear about the Ford production line, you hear about Kaizen and the theories that they use in Japan. And then you eventually come into the working world and realize nothing works like that in real life. I was doing a business management degree. Alongside that, just had jobs here and there. One of those jobs was a supervisor on the shop floor in Holland and Barrett. And I used that on my CV and just all this work experience to leverage the fact that when I left university, I just had quite a shining CV of retail management, supervisor level. Managed to get a job as an assistant manager on the Harrods shop floor. So it was a small team, there was 8 people in one of the like chocolate booths in the chocolate floor. And I've just very quickly realised how out of my depth I was. I was managing a team of 8. All of them were older than me. All of them were much more experienced in the world of work, in the world of service than I was. Managing shifts is something that's really difficult because you have to manage lateness, you have to manage people's personal life and expectations and working hours and how much people get paid. And so managing shifts is really difficult. So I got thrown into that, learnt a lot about the world of management and people. I was a really bad manager at that time. If I look back, I avoided every difficult conversation. I avoided telling people the tough things in one-to-ones. I wouldn't accept that I was wrong about anything. I think I just kind of was just filled with confidence, but at the same time had such imposter syndrome that this confidence was just to mask the fact that I felt less. And I was looking for approval, and I just masked that with, it's okay, I've got this, I can do everything. And I was never overly kind of assertive or loud. I was just had imposter syndrome and masked it with fake confidence. Left that job because it was just didn't enjoy it whatsoever. Had a really difficult time with my mental health. 69% of employees say their manager has more impact on their mental health than their therapist or their doctor. And so if you just map that out into the world of leadership today as we know it, only 15% of managers ever get any formal training. We're putting the mental health of people at work in the hands of people who barely have any training. And I was at that time one of the people who suffered mentally with self-worth, anxiety, like workplace anxiety. Anyone you speak to will either be experiencing workplace anxiety right now, or will have some really serious stories in the past of how it's negatively impacted their life because of how bad their job is. Anyway, had a really tough time at Harrods, learnt a lot, moved into the world of SaaS, so software as a service, moved into the world of SaaS, worked it was in the music industry, like a software company in the music industry. Didn't stay there long, moved into then a company called Go Proposal, so I was the second member of staff. I stayed with Go Proposal for, it was over 5 years, nearly 6 years, and this experience kind of made up the big chunk of my career and where I learned the absolute most. I came in as being, the second person. I didn't even really have a job role, as everyone will know in startups. You just scrap in, everyone's doing what's possible. Eventually moved into a marketing manager role. So I'd been doing a lot of the marketing, nurture sequences, kind of the data behind marketing, but also the front-ended stuff, so social media, videography, all sorts. Moved into the marketing manager role, we built out that team, and over the course of 3-ish years, we built that company into we had no investment, and we built it into a multi-million pound revenue software company. I got promoted into the operations director role, which was a big jump for me. It was moving from managing a marketing team into managing all of the 5 teams that we had. And the reason they brought someone into that role was because we were about to sell the company. So we were about to go through an exit. Yeah. And the founder built an incredibly strong personal brand. And in order to sell a company, you have to detach the software, the company, the product, the culture, everything from the founder itself. Yeah. And so it was a really strategic role promoting me to ops director because we had to have someone that was running the business away from the founder. So huge role, really just like grabbed it and ran with it, loved every single second, learnt so much, did the majority of the work behind the sale. So lots of the back end things, if anyone's ever been through a sale of a company that's tens of millions of pounds, it's huge work, due diligence that'll keep you up into the early hours of the night, like spreadsheets, data, everything. So that was really eye-opening. And then we sold the company to Sage, who were a FTSE 100. So we went from this really small startup team, I think maybe 30 people at the time, and our entire team moved into Sage, which was a huge corporate, 11,000-ish employees. And so my job stayed the same title-wise, but completely changed overnight into all of a sudden, I was an ops director in moving from a £2 million company into a £2 billion company with our roles were all of a sudden global. We were traveling around the world. We were working with teams, managing products across the US, Australia, etc. So the role just expanded 10 times within the space of a day, and it was awesome. So I worked at Sage for 2 years, and during that time, so this is kind of where Leadership Heather came from, and the world of kind of teaching leadership and education. So whilst I was at Sage, anyone who works in corporate will know you do these kind of 6 monthly surveys to understand culture, how everyone's feeling, how engaged the teams are. When I was at Sage, my team were consistently getting super high scores for engagement, retention. We'd never lost a team member. No one had ever left. How much we were using the values, how we felt connected to the company, etc. And so one day, one of the women high up in learning and development came to me and said, like, what are you doing? Can you teach? Can you help? Can you come and teach us? And it started by running some workshops for their like aspiring leaders group. Then it moved into running workshops for things like core values, OKRs across different sections of the business for senior leaders, middle managers, and everyone else. So started running these workshops and just realized how much I loved it and how much value there was in it, how much impact I could have. And yeah, took the leap to go self-employed last July. 7th of July last year was when I left.
Wow. So we're a year and a bit on.
Yes. Yeah. I went traveling for 6 months because I was like, I can't have a career break in my mid to late 20s, definitely late 20s. I can't have a career break in my late 20s and not, go and explore the world a little bit. So took the opportunity to go traveling for 6 months, had the best time ever, and kind of was running the business a little, like way less than I am right now, just posting content, having a few one-on-one clients, just, it was a really beautiful time. And just, I think what that time forced me to do that I would recommend any business owner do if they are just starting out, and it's really difficult to do this. We want to move at 1,000%. We want to move at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But what that time forced me to do, and you don't need to go traveling, you can do this anyway, is I couldn't decide on a brand. I couldn't decide on a service package. I couldn't hold myself to like crazy high standards with what I wanted to achieve because I just physically couldn't. But fast forward a year, that's been so instrumental in the fact that I only launched my brand in August this year. So I did a huge brand launch. Fresh Leadership World is the name of my business. Before that, I didn't have a name. I didn't have a website. I didn't have I kind of didn't have a business, quote unquote, per se. It was just me existing on social media and understanding my audience, learning about customers. But that time forced me to figure out what the brand needed to be instead of just what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would hugely encourage, just if you're at the very beginning of a business journey, don't stress it too much about need a brand, need a website, need a business immediately. Just let yourself just understand your customer, understand your world, what you bring and what you love, and that can all come in time.
Couldn't agree more. And I have to say the work that kind of that career journey has led you to do now is so incredibly needed, because even just speaking from personal experience, that whole topic of not just managing people, but also everything that sits around that of hiring people and stepping into that role of leadership, I think can come with so many question marks and anxieties. And I'm really excited to be sat here today able to talk about how does that relate to us as business owners, because it is, and I say this with real confidence, and I really am not making this up, it is the biggest thing I hear people say as business owners that they don't like doing or they don't want to do. I was actually just at a lunch with a work friend who was telling me about team members that they have and challenges that they're having, and was saying it honestly is just, for me, the worst part about running a business is having to have team, or not necessarily having team, but having to be a manager. That's why I think your work is so needed, is because just as you've already said with that crazy stat around mental health, your role as a manager is really important, but also it's something that so few people are trained for. So I guess there's a place for us to begin, because I know there's going to be so much expertise that you share in this episode. Why do you think being a manager is something that people are so put off by or overwhelmed by, or just have that really negative connotation with? What do you notice about where that comes from?
So if we're specifically talking about small business owners, we get into what we do not because we love the idea of leading a team. We love the idea of running one-to-ones or doing salary reviews or dealing with drama and gossip. We get into business because we generally love our craft, whatever that may be. We're passionate about our craft. We want to share that thing with the world. Then all of a sudden, the world receives it and goes, wow, this is incredible. We grow, we make money, and we're like, shit, I can't do this on my own. It's incredibly difficult at that point. Anyone who is kind of sat here thinking, I run a small business, I'm great at what I do, but I don't want to manage a team. I don't want to lead a team. I'm going to hold your hand when I say this. If you don't take that part of your business seriously, you are putting yourself at a high chance of failure. The definition of a company is a group of people. In order for your business to succeed, you need to be managing people well. What I am not saying is you need to do expensive training, you need to invest in a coach, you don't need any of that. But what you need to do is take managing people very seriously. You can start with some super simple tricks. Like, the first thing I always say to people is, we're not aiming to be perfect, and our team don't have to see us as perfect either. So when we have difficult conversations, say we notice our team are underperforming and we want to have a conversation with them about it, a lot of people worry about going into that conversation because they think, well, what if my team confront me? What if they come back and say, well, I need evidence, or I need to know exactly what it is, and they kind of get confrontational. And because of that, because we're fearful that's going to happen, we don't have the conversation in the first place, and we just put it off until it becomes something way bigger than it ever needed to be. But when we accept that we don't need to be perfect, we don't need to have the answer to every question, we can go into that conversation, and if we get faced with something confrontational that we don't know the answer to, just hold our hands up and go, I don't know. And we can fall back on feelings and say, I don't have all the answers. I'm not aiming to be a perfect conversation. All I know is what you did upset me, or it made me feel hurt, or it angered me, or I felt like you weren't caring about the work you were doing. And when we kind of embrace that idea of no manager is perfect, no leader is perfect, it becomes so much easier to execute the things that we need to execute.
And I think you're so right. There's that overwhelm or even just resistance at the thought of moving into that role of management, because you're right, often for so long in a business it is just us. I think we can sometimes enjoy the simplicity that can come with that. I know that even when I went through a recent hiring process, I was really transparent in saying to people, look, my natural way of working is not with people around me. I've spent years and years and years being in my own head, in my own space, doing everything myself, and that transition can feel quite jarring. But as you said, if we want a business that has that scalability to it, I see it with so many of my clients. It feels like we keep coming back to this conversation of capacity. You kind of have to go, look, if we want to get to there, we can't do it alone. If we're going to have to do this thing of being a manager in some capacity in order to get there, let's do it in the best way. And I think that's a great reminder to even just enter this conversation with, if it doesn't look like perfection. Yeah. If we even take a step back and people are listening to this and thinking, oh, well, I'm not yet a manager, but that's maybe on the horizon for me. Having, I'd imagine, hired so many people over your career, also now since in your own business, what would you say for people listening, and maybe the signs or the things to look out for that tell you that maybe it is the time to think about having people in your team? So I guess the thing to note is that for business owners, it can look so many different ways. It might be about having freelancers, it might be about having a VA, it might be about having someone full-time, part-time. Like, there's a lot of ways that being a manager can look. For people listening, how do you know when it might be the time for you to explore that?
So I'm just going to take a step back and go, because you said something really important. You made it super clear in the recruitment process that you're used to working alone and you're used to working on your own, and maybe that's a bit of a vulnerability and you're a bit worried that that's going to be difficult for someone if they need a manager and they need to be led. But quite often, our vulnerabilities are often our biggest superpower. Whatever we feel the most insecure about, the most vulnerable about as a leader, is often the thing that makes us so special and unique. And I so often say that to people. A lot of managers in corporate come to me who are younger, like they might be younger than a lot of their colleagues, or they're managing people who are older than them. That's what's so special though. They haven't put you in that position because they've gone, oh, you've got decades of experience, I want to bring it in. They've said they need a bit of this, like they need you, just like we need the people who have the decades of experience. We put it all together and it makes an incredible mix. So whatever your biggest vulnerability is, I guarantee you can flip it on its head and it can be a superpower. Let's talk about the signs. So everything looks different. All I can talk to is, I guess, my own business.
Yeah, please do.
A lot of hiring decisions, it comes from our money mindset. Depending on whether you're someone who is high risk tolerance and you want to invest super early and bring someone in and you're ready to invest in your business. But I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I'm a conservative spender when it comes to spending. Like, I really never wanted to build a business that would get me to the point where I was laid in bed awake at night worried about not being able to pay someone's wages. And so I actually probably left it a bit longer than I should to hire my first employee, but I don't regret it because now she's been with us for 4 months. I have complete confidence in our finances and I have nothing to worry about. I think if I'd have hired her 3 months earlier, we may be a little further ahead in the business. Like we might be a couple steps ahead of where we are now, but I think I would have been stressed for those few months.
Yeah.
Whilst we got the financial, like the cash flow right to
and
bring
that's
someone
going to let you
in.
be a good manager if you've got that
100%.
stress.
Oh my God, 100%. Principle that I always follow in my own business is I never want to be making decisions from a place of desperation, ever. I want all my decisions to be made from a place of love, from a place of abundance. And if I want to say no to a client, if I want to say no to traveling somewhere that's going to like keep me up at night, if I want to say no to doing a gig that's going to keep me away from my partner and I miss like spending time at home, I can do because I don't have to make decisions from a place of desperation. And that's a principle that I think I actually learned by accident because of traveling, because I managed to build the business really slowly. Like I accidentally forced myself to build it slowly by going away, and it's just kind of stuck with me. So through the 6 months or so that I've been back, all of my decisions now don't have to be made from a place of desperation. When it comes to looking for the signs, I think, and this goes for whether you're in corporate, big business, whether you're in small business, anything, you want to be working on the most valuable things. You want to be working on the things that are your strengths, and your strengths are not what you're good at. You as a business owner will be good at a million different things. Your strengths are what strengthen you. So like when you wake up in the morning and you're like, this is what I can't wait to do today. Today's going to be a great day. Whatever you do in that day, that's your strengths. On the days where you like feel a bit crappy before you go to bed, like you're a little bit anxious, you wake up and you're like, oh, I can't wait to get this day done. That's a flag. That's like a red flag that whatever you're doing in that day isn't where you should be spending your time. You should be looking to outsource it. Maybe it's not even right for your business. What I would recommend anyone do, this is exactly what I do with my teams in business, small business, any size business. Write up a roles and responsibilities document for you. And this is not aspirational. This is exactly what you do day to day. So if you are unlocking the office, cleaning the windows, you need that on there. Like every single thing you're doing day to day. How many hours roughly you're spending in meetings, how many hours you're spending doing emails, all of it. Then just do a very quick traffic light system, red, amber, green. Greens being what strengthens you, what adds value to the business, what you love doing, what's bringing in cash, and what's just, this is why I started my business, to do these green things. Red being, this is a big fat waste of my time. We just shouldn't be doing it. Amber then kind of being somewhere in the middle, like maybe we don't love it, we know it adds quite a bit of value, like we don't hate it, but we might not be able to get rid of it straight away.
Yeah.
The red things, honestly, I would advise before you even go to hiring, just get rid of them straight away. Whatever they are, they're usually urgent tasks like meetings. For me, that was one-on-ones, running one-to-ones. Coaching calls with clients. I know you've also recently made the decision to stop one-on-one calls. It was nothing to do with my clients. I adored them all. It was just very difficult to have a day that was back-to-back with calls. My energy would be drained by the end of the day. I felt like I wasn't giving everyone 100%. I felt like I wasn't reaching as many people as I could with my messages because it was very direct. And I know the impact of those calls was good, but for me, I was like, I'm gonna have to get rid of them. And it was tough because they brought money. Like it was a consistent stream of revenue. Making the decision to let those calls go was a really tricky one. But what it did was free up my time to work on the greens and the oranges. And when it comes to hiring, what I would say is when you can be very honest with yourself and say you've got rid of the reds and you're not working on pointless things, because so often we just make ourselves busy for no reason and we just busy and we're working on the greens and the reds, and it gets to the day where you go, the business is doing, we've got a good cash flow, we can afford to hire someone that's really important. I'm not going to advise this, but I'm just going to tell you in my business, I would never hire someone before I was 100% sure I could afford them. Never. Once we know we can afford them, we've got rid of we've cut all the fat in terms of what we're doing so we're not wasting our time. Then we have this set of skills, green and orange, and we go, which of these things is there maybe 2 or 3 key things that are really great adding value to the business, but I just can't do them anymore? And who is that person we can find to do them? So I'd recommend that exercise. It's really good. I call it the roles and responsibilities audit, and I do it all the time, really regularly. So sometimes if we end up getting really stressed and lost, I'm like, let's do a roles and responsibilities audit and figure out if we're just doing loads of crap that isn't really serving us.
Interesting. I feel like lots of people are going to want to pause the episode and go away and do that exercise now. I think that's a really nice practical way to look at it, because otherwise it can just feel very blue sky of like, someone just tell me when is the right time. And I guess the answer is there's no right time that's universal. It's thinking about, and I love that point as well, not just the right timing but also the right financial investment, because that's a really unfair stress or responsibility to put on someone else. I'm curious, and you can totally say, no, this doesn't feel like something that's maybe you've spoken around before, but I guess for business owners listening, there are a few routes you can go down in order to be a manager within your company. You can have freelance team, full-time, part-time. I know obviously we can speak from your personal experience earlier in the year hiring your first team member and you went all in full-time. Was that a really conscious, immediate decision? Do you have any advice for anyone who's maybe done that exercise and gone, yeah, I'm ready for the help? How do you choose which route to go down?
So I have both. Freelancers can be incredible. I would always, when it comes to freelancers, I run the business on recommendations. So I just need someone to recommend them that I know and trust. If that's the case, then I'll go with them. I try to stay away from kind of just Googling or finding them on social media, or I have done that once and it worked really well. Freelancers, they've played a huge role in my business. So for example, our website design, brand design was all done by an incredible, I don't know if she's freelancer, she runs a design studio business, but someone external who we still work with her today to do design bits like really regularly. When I launched Fresh Start, which is my course, 6-week course for new managers, I brought in a course building expert because I had no idea what I was doing. And it was quite a chunky investment, but knew I just needed it. I had no idea what I was doing, and it was like a Kajabi expert, which is where the course is built. So I brought that person in to work with me for a couple of months to do all the technical build, help guide me in like, what does a great course look like? How does it flow? How do you sell it? How do you find out what needs to be in there? What else do we have? We are always using Fiverr. For like Levi, who's my full-time employee now. Levi, just this morning we had a strategy meeting about, we're building out lots of assets, like lead magnet assets. Levi has done like an asset audit. So she's come to me and said, we've got these 12 really strong assets. She's got them, found them. I've already written blog posts or done videos. The next step is then either Levi sits and builds them all out and it'll take weeks, or what we decided was pay someone on Fiverr. We found a great person for 60 quid per PDF and they'll just go through them. And so it's a real trade-off.
Yeah.
Freelancers and just bringing external people into the business is really important for me. And I love people who are just experts. I'm learning from them. Like some of my closest friends now were people who I brought into the business to help me with something. And now we're just really good friends. So I would never turn my nose up at that world because it's incredible. For me, it was just a case of like, this is a full-time role now, and this is going to be better having someone in-house. I don't really know. I feel like I can't talk to like what the exact decisions were. I think as a business owner, you will know when someone, there's no point paying there's no point paying freelancer prices if it's a full-time job and you can get someone in-house that you can help like level up to your standards, your values.
Yeah.
You can have their like support you, be there full time.
No, it's just really interesting to hear your approach and kind of your perspective on that. If we then get into, I guess, the process once or whilst you're getting someone into your team, one of the things that I've really learned from you is onboarding. Now, I've had quite a few different people within my business over the years, lots of freelancers, but also quite a few people who work with me on a freelance basis, but on a more kind of permanent basis, if that makes sense. They're almost kind of in-house, a few days a week, kind of working across the business. And I've actually had that since about 2018, and it's been different people across the years. And one of the things that I really learned from like reflection really on some of the earlier people that I had on board was that I didn't onboard them. The onboarding consisted of like, oh, let's go for lunch and I'll give you some logins and then I'll just start throwing stuff at you and we'll see where we go from there. And actually it was earlier in the year as I started to think about bringing on my next team member, I realized onboarding is something I want to do with intention. And the reason that I realized that and decided that was because I looked back and realized that a lot of the challenges I'd had as a manager with team members was nothing to do with them, nothing to do with what I'd done once they were up and running, but actually everything to do with what I had missed at the beginning. And I sent you a picture, didn't I, of me sat at home with you on my TV watching your YouTube videos about onboarding a team member.
Oh, it's such an old video as well. I've got like big cringe fear because my early YouTube videos they need redoing, but anyway,
well, there was
the
a lot of
info's
value
there.
there.
Yeah.
The information had huge value to it because it really helped me to think about onboarding in an intentional way and really taking responsibility for that as the manager. Putting you on the spot here, what are your top 3 tips for onboarding, perhaps based on what you think maybe the top 3 mistakes are that people make when onboarding team members?
Everything I've built stems from having really bad onboarding experiences in the past. So everyone listening to this, just take a second to think of onboarding experiences that you've had. And you might not even be able to think of them because you're like, they're non-existent. The idea of onboarding, so 90 days, let's just say for argument's sake, we do 90 days onboarding. We need to set this person up for success. That's what we want to do. That's the whole aim, is to set this person up for success as best as we absolutely can. So the first thing I always do is make sure that we have a really clear, organised training board. Now, whatever you use, whether it's Notion, Asana, Monday.com, Excel, anything, this can be so simple, but you need like a 90-day board, and I tend to have 4 columns. So I'll have first week, first 30 days, first 60 days, first 90 days. In the first week, you will have a list of things like, these are our values, we'll talk through them. These are the logins that you need. This is, go and understand everything about Heather's socials, about her messaging, the website, the services that we offer. Go speak to a couple of clients, ask Heather to introduce you to a couple of clients. That'll be the first week. The first week, we don't want lots of pressure necessarily. We just want them getting into our world and understanding our world and what we're all about. I'm not doing very well with the 3 tips here. Okay, well, tip 1 is have this board.
Which, by the way, you did show in your YouTube video.
Yes.
And I paused it very strategically to spy on what your board had on it. And it was, things like that, and thinking intentionally about like what sits in those timeframes, which actually I can say, I hope she doesn't mind me saying, B, who's in the room, who I shared that with, saw it and immediately said, oh my gosh, this is so nice to see. Like, to feel like someone is not just planning for you, but also setting expectation between the both of you of like, here's what I'm expecting to happen in these timeframes. Because I feel like that's such a hard thing if it's not clarified.
We as humans, all we want is to feel cared about. We just want to feel cared for. And it just is this moment where you go, oh, this company cares. I'm not just a cog. Like, I'm important and I'm valuable, and they respect me, and they are investing in my training and my onboarding. And creating it can be so simple, and you don't have to get it perfect. But even just having that board with a list of week 1, 30 day, 60 day, 90 day will make them feel cared for. There's such a huge opportunity there because companies just aren't doing it. No business is doing it. So like you said, it's the wow factor, which is crazy because it should just be so normal. Tip number 2 is start delegating early. People learn so much better from doing the doing than they ever will from just being told how to do something. I'm going to use the example of an accountancy firm because I work with a lot of accountancy firms. If you're trying to hand over a client portfolio to the new person, quite often what would happen is you would wait until they've completed their 90 days and then you would start handing them clients. A much more effective thing to do would be get the first week done, just get them involved in the world, and then when you tip over to week 2, hand over 1 small client and just introduce them, a client that you trust, that is going to be okay for them to test some things out with. Introduce them to a client and just start to get them involved in the world. Week 2, introduce them to another client, and before you know it, when you get to the end of the 90 days, they're already working with 10 of those clients. You've maybe got another 10 to give them. Just delegate quickly and small, and just start small and start getting them used to it. You can apply that to any task. So if you're handing over social media, like one of my friends messaged me the other day, she's just brought in a marketing assistant into her team and she is the marketing manager. The tip I gave her was just don't hide them from the social logins. It can feel scary, especially when something's so public, but just let them test, just let them try it, because even if they do quote unquote fail, or do something wrong, they're going to learn so much more from that than you telling them don't do this, don't do that thing. So delegate early. Last thing is you need to set the accountability right from the beginning. What I mean by that is accountability is a really key component in teams. And what it means is it's the difference between, are you as a leader, business owner, constantly going to your team saying, have you done this? Can you do this tomorrow? Will you do this? And an accountable team member, you wouldn't even have to ask them because they know what they're accountable for. They will bring you things. They will be proactive. When we do review meetings and review KPIs, instead of you going, we've not hit it, I need to give you 5 new ideas to try, they will come to you and say, okay, we've not done this month. Here's what I'm going to test next month. Have you got any ideas? Do you want me to test this XYZ? So there's a huge difference between accountable and non-accountable team members. You can set accountability expectations right from the beginning with this onboarding. Just very small things like, instead of I've booked you training to come and sit with me in a meeting room and train you on this, just put it in there. Maybe it's the day 30. Book a training with Heather to go through X. And it's on them. So you're going to still help them. You're there to support them. But they need to find a time in their calendar. They need to find something that's suitable for them and get you booked in and locked in. And so use that as an opportunity to put the accountability on them. It could be, this is one I love. So like, say if you got a piece of software, let's say Notion, you get them a Notion login. Instead of saying, I'm going to explain Notion to you, there's 1,000,001 YouTube videos that explain Notion way better than me or you ever could. And just get them to find their own way around it. And it's like, go and watch a YouTube video to understand the basics of Notion. And they might learn something more than you and come back to you and say, did you know we could do this thing? You're like, wow. And so just use it as an opportunity to put the accountability accountability in the right place. And it just, we're talking about like making sure our team are accountable, but ultimately it's better for them as human beings because they get more autonomy, they get more independence over their work, they get to learn more, they get to be a bigger part of something, and so it works best for both parties.
Yeah, those are really helpful steps. And I think what you mentioned in particularly that second point around helping people to learn from action is so key. I think sometimes it's quite backwards, isn't it? Because business owners, we're all about like messy action and experiment and learn. And then we have team in and suddenly we're all scared to trust them with things. Understandably, because our businesses feel very precious to us, there can be that fear, can't there, around kind of giving people responsibility. What if things go wrong? Giving them a chance to learn from that. Giving feedback, I think, is something that I've heard a lot of clients and friends in business struggle with. And what I often hear, and actually I just, can even say from personal experience here, it sometimes feels like this balance between we care so much as a business owner. Of course, we want to give this feedback, make sure this thing is done well. But then we also want to have these values of kindness and letting people learn from quote unquote mistakes. How do you navigate that? Like, what does it look like to give feedback in a way that is honest, in a way that is clear, but also that isn't mean? Like, is that a silly question? I feel like my fear is like, if I give constructive feedback, I'm mean and I'm scared of upsetting someone.
No, you're not mean, you're the opposite. Giving feedback is one of the most precious gifts I think anyone can ever get. Some of the biggest transformations, growth journeys I've ever been on have been because I've had honest feedback. If you're someone who really struggles having those difficult feedback, honest conversations, and a lot of us are because we've been taught to avoid confrontation. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. We've been told those things from a very young age. I would start by getting it. So just go and ask for it. Ask a very direct question. You could ask a team member, you could even ask a friend, a family member, your partner. What's one thing you wish you could change about the way I manage you? What's one thing you wish you could change about how I show up in XYZ situation? When we start to get comfortable asking for it and receiving it, you will see how transformational those honest conversations can be, and you get to see it from your side. So say you go to a team member and say, this happened to me once. Asked a member of my team, if there was one thing you could change about the way I manage you, what would it be? And they said, there's like a piece of work that was coming to me to look at for an approval, let's say. I didn't approve it. I would just change something and then let it go, instead of actually going to them and explaining, like, this is why I don't think it's the best, or this is why I think we need to change X, Y, and Z. And I was kind of just doing it because I was rushing, but it was great feedback. And I got that feedback and I was like, oh my God, I do that. And I was kind of preaching for other people not to do it. And I was like, really not practicing what I preach here. That feedback was just so instrumental in the way that I now manage my existing team, managed my teams in corporate after that. And when you start to receive feedback, you just start to see how it's never badly okay, I'm not going to say never. It's very rarely badly intentioned. And when someone puts themselves out of their comfort zone to give you honest feedback, there's very little to do other than thank them. Usually, like 99.99% of scenarios. And it's difficult because our ego takes a hit. It's difficult because we don't like to be told things that we might be doing wrong or that other people are perceiving badly. But I would say go and get it first, like to do that as your first step. The main thing when it comes to feedback with our team is to just never ignore it. That comes above everything else. Just never ever ignore it. If we ignore it, it doesn't go away.
Receiving or giving feedback?
Sorry, giving feedback. So
okay.
we'll move away from getting feedback into giving feedback. The biggest thing is never ignore it.
So if something happens and you have that niggle in your head, if I want to say something, don't ignore that.
Yeah. A lot of the time, the reason people ignore it is because they think, I've not got enough evidence. What if they don't agree with me? Like, what if it causes confrontation? I don't know how to back myself up. You don't need any of that. You can simply go into a conversation and say to someone, the thing you said there, or what you just did, or the way you acted has upset me a little bit, and I just want to talk about it. And that's enough. Just start the conversation.
Yeah.
Most of the time, your team member, because they will be brilliant, will go, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't even realise, but, let's talk about it. And you don't have to have evidence, you don't have to back it up with anything. It's like, just open the box, just keep the honesty, keep the transparency going. That's all I would say, just focus on that. You don't have to be perfect, just never ignore it. The method I then like to use, once you kind of go through those steps and you get comfortable-ish receiving it, you start to get good at giving it in the moment and not letting perfection get in your way. The method...
Just to ask on that, of giving it in the moment, would that also be a reason to kind of give the feedback almost as it's needing to be given versus like, oh, I'll add that to a list and we'll mention that at the end of the month? Would you just keep it open?
Always keep it open. Never leave anything to the end of the month. you'll just make it harder for yourself because you'll work yourself up about the conversation. More importantly, it's unfair on the team member because they will have forgotten the scenario. So or if they remember, it'll be a lot less fresh in their mind. So they won't be able to like go, oh yeah, that did happen, or it's just going to be confusing for them. They're going to be like, why have you just not told me for the last 3 weeks that I did something that upset you? It's deeply unfair to save feedback for an end of month appraisal, an end of year meeting. We have to give it in the moment. The only time I would say don't give in the moment feedback is if you are highly emotional. And there are situations when that happens. I've been there myself before. It might be that you're really upset about something. You might even feel angry about something. You might feel excited even. Like, even if you have to give good feedback and you're just really excited, you have to let those emotions just run their course and kind of take a breather.
Yeah.
If you're really upset, just go, take a breather, go stand in the meeting room, go for a walk, just let your body like process them and then have the conversation, because it's not going to help anyone if you have it when you're in a very heightened state of emotion.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think links to something that also can come up as a lot as business owners, which maybe slightly links to where we try and draw the line of what to give feedback on, what not to give feedback on, is this expectation that we're going to have a team member that cares as much as we do. I guess it's a little bit different if you're perhaps a manager in a corporate setting. You care, but there's probably a line to which that care stops. As business owners, those lines can get very blurred / non-existent, right? Like, often we've started this thing by ourselves. We'll have all of this context of work and hardship and risk that we've put into it. It'll often be a representation of us as individuals, so we'll feel really, really passionately about it. What do you say to people that say like, oh, I just want to find a team member that like cares as much as I do? Or like, how do you, I guess even for you personally, navigate like finding where to draw that line? Because one of the things I've really realised is like, it's not fair to expect for anyone to care as much as I do. So how do you advise people navigate that?
I just don't think anyone should care as much as you do. Yeah. If someone cared as much about my business that I own 100% of, that I do, I'd be worried. I'd be like, I don't care enough. It's a really important principle in both team leadership and in marketing as well. This really important principle that I use in marketing. No one cares. We have to make them care. We have to bring them along for the journey. You have to assume that every single task you delegate to your team, let's use the example of, we've got a social media post that needs to go out and there's been a huge update in the Instagram algorithm and you have done all this research and you understand loads about it. If you just hand that to your team member and say, here's the update, do this post, they're kind of going to do exactly that, probably to like a 70-80% standard at best. And that's all we can expect because you've done all the research, you've got all that knowledge in your head. If you assume they don't care, and neither should they, what you do is go into that delegation with, let's first explain to them why they should care. We can use the vision of the business, we can use their personal goals to help them, get them excited. And obviously this all comes from a very honest place. Like, we're not just fabricating a reason why they should care. It's like, I know you want to develop in social media and it's a great opportunity for you to do that. There's been an update in the Instagram algorithm. I've learned all of this. You can go and learn it for yourself here. It's really exciting to me. I think it's a great opportunity for you. And then delegate it. No one cares as much as we do. It's just the truth. It's so the truth. I would never expect anyone to care about my business as much as me unless they owned 50% of it. Ever. But people care. No one cares as much as we do. It's just the truth. It's so the truth. I would never expect anyone to care about my business as much as me unless they owned 50% of it. Just find those things. Help them to use those things as a vehicle for their own success, and your business is just one of the machines that helps them get there.
It's so interesting, isn't it? The kind of complexities, or I guess just the differences of managing within your own business. Like, even from your personal experience, I guess you'll have managed and hired so many people under kind of someone else's company. Mm-hmm. Have you seen and felt a real difference since doing it for your own?
My default wants to say no. It is different. There is definitely more fear, like more just caution, and I want to get this 1,000,000% right, even though that will never happen. But, because it feels more precious and it feels more like you want to be cautious. But if I was to be honest, my methods have stayed the same, like throughout the last sort of 4 or 5 years of really like leveling up in leadership. The standards I expect of myself, giving feedback, hiring, just inclusion, like being kind, those standards I've always kept super high. So I think it still feels the same now I'm in my business.
So the principles feel really similar.
Yeah.
And actually, you said the word kind there. You've got some really interesting thoughts around what kindness looks like in relation to leadership, which actually, when I heard you speak about previously, really resonated with me, because I think it had always been this word that I'd come up against of like, does kindness and leadership coexist? And I just want to be kind, and that's what I'm struggling with. Can you share a bit more for people about what kind of that theory looks like for you?
So there's a huge difference between being nice and being kind. If we have to stop being so nice. Being nice has no place in leadership. If you Google the word nice, the definition, it comes up with words like pleasant, agreeable, satisfactory. If you Google the word kind, even though it feels very similar, the words feel similar. If you Google the word kind, the words that come along with that definition are generous, helpful, and caring. So even though those two words, nice and kind, feel similar, they are worlds apart. To be nice is to not give someone the difficult feedback. It's going to hurt their feelings. Like, you're going to upset people. But if you were nice, you don't want to upset people. Just keep it. Don't tell them. If you were being nice, you would never disagree with people's opinions. You would be constantly in like a short-term. We're looking for short-term approval. We're looking for quick wins. We're looking for keep the peace. Don't be confrontational. That's being nice.
Yeah, it's almost seeking comfort, isn't it? That short-term ease.
Absolutely. Being kind, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. It's difficult. And being kind would be you give them the difficult feedback. It may hurt their feelings, and we know that and we accept that. But we also know that they are an incredible human with so much potential, yet there is one thing we can see that may be holding them back, and we are willing to be the person that gives them that feedback. Being kind would be calling someone out, for example, like, you know, if someone says something that really goes against your values, this is a hard one, I struggled with this for years, and just saying something, speaking up and calling them out. Being kind, like, we have to be kind in leadership. If we don't, we just fall into people pleasing. You might make it into a middle manager role. You'll be stressed and overwhelmed because you'll be anxious because you will have been having no difficult conversations. But if we're kind, you will have many uncomfortable situations where you're giving feedback that you've struggled to give, where you are making decisions based on the long term instead of short term approval. But ultimately, the difference between being nice and kind is the difference between working for short term approval or working for long term respect. And if you want to earn that long term respect as a leader, you have to stop being nice. You have to stop people pleasing and be kind.
I love that reframe, because I just think that's something that we all feel tempted to do, don't we? I think probably as well, especially as women, people in the UK, like you said, even when you said earlier, you know, that messaging of like, if you've not got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Like, just made me think, wow, like from what a young age we're kind of subliminally told not to have the hard conversations. Makes me think, actually, one of my friends that runs, I won't say what type of business she runs, it'd probably be clear then who she is, and she probably won't appreciate that. One of my friends runs a business, has a lot of team members, and she jokes about this t-shirt she has that says hard conversations, easy life, and she always talks to me about it when we're talking about the challenges around teams. She's like, hard conversations, easy life.
100%.
Have the hard conversation, life gets easier.
Could not agree more. I truly believe so much growth is waiting for you on the other side of that difficult conversation that you are currently not willing to have. And it may not even be with your team. It may be with a parent. It might be with a sibling. It might be with a partner. And you might have put it off for years, maybe even decades. And it's going to be the most uncomfortable conversation. But the growth on the other side of it is, honestly, I just think it can unlock a whole different world of love and potential and happiness.
I want to end with just a couple of questions that have come up that I think some of the listeners might be wanting to ask just as we round off this conversation. One of which possibly to people feels like the hardest conversation you might have to have, getting rid of / no longer having a team member. What are your, I don't even know if tips is the right word, but how do people know when it's time, that maybe it's just not a right fit, and to maybe let both parties part ways? I was going to say like firing someone, but that just sounds really intense, doesn't it? How do you navigate knowing when that's a decision that needs to be made?
Might as well call it what it is. Firing someone, yeah. It is single-handedly the second most difficult conversation you ever have to have. I had to have a conversation with someone once to tell them they had bad body odor. That was also awful, and like, if I know that was awful. But conversations that are deeply personal, awful to have, but still necessary. We still cannot avoid them. I would say one of the huge flags for me. So here's the thing, like, if you are committing to having difficult conversations, it makes it so much easier to know if someone needs to be let go or not. Because if you say you've had a team member for 6 months and their performance is really crap, to what you think anyway, they're not performing well, you think they're not like using their time very well, then whatever. If you haven't told them, it's going to be really difficult when it comes to letting them go or deciding to let them go. And if you've avoided those difficult conversations, it's going to be a lot harder to have this one. So if you commit to having those conversations up front, quite often we can avoid having to let someone go because we've helped to kind of mold them into the people that we need, like the skills, leveled them up, etc. And it also should be easy because when we get to the point of deciding to let someone go or not, ideally, we have already had at least 3 difficult conversations and we've had some sort of performance management that is tracked. So like a measurable, again, keep it super simple, but like a spreadsheet that helps them to see you're not performing at the minute. This is where we need you to be. If you don't get here within, it might be 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, it usually depends on how long they've been with the company, you're going to lose your job. You need to tell them that, because if they don't understand what the consequence of this is, it's again not being fair. So when you get to the point, ideally, the decision should be made. Like it should, if you've done everything kind of properly, the decision should be made. However, I appreciate that's not always right. One of the big red flags for me in human beings in business is if I give them a piece of difficult feedback and they really will not take it on. Now, I am willing to be challenged. I am willing for them to disagree, and I will always hear them out and have that conversation, and I am 100% happy to be wrong. But there's a difference between kind of people disagreeing with what you're saying or someone just accepting no level of responsibility or accountability for what they're doing and why it might have caused upset, or like why it might be bad performance. So if you take a difficult conversation to them and they're just completely unwilling to accept that they might be in the wrong in any way, that's a real like red flag. There's a action coach, it's like decades old, really great coach consultancy business built, if you Google this, a bit of a wanky acronym, but it's ORBED, which is above the line you've got ownership, acceptance, ownership, accountability, responsibility, and you've got a line, and you've got blame, excuses, and denial. And we want everyone to be operating above the line. So if people are constantly falling below the line, blame, excuses, and denial, for me that's the biggest human red flag. But I would again manage that performance to try and get them back.
No, that's really helpful. And the final question I want to end on, I mean, there's so many more I wish I could ask, and I'm sure so much that listeners will then, come to your amazing content and resources and find more about. But I think one other final topic, which actually you mentioned, is often quite specific to business owners, which as you said it, my brain just went, yeah, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, learnt some hard lessons. Hiring friends.
Yeah.
Hiring people that you know in a very personal setting. I think often, especially in a business capacity, your network, your friends, it can feel like a real mixed bag in a lovely way. It's lovely that we build such close relationships. What are your we've not got too long, so I guess what are your thoughts on hiring or working with friends? Is it something that can be done? If so, how do we navigate it? Or is it, in your opinion, one of those things that's easier to draw a line on?
I'll try and answer this quick. I appreciate I'm not good at answering stuff quick.
No, detail's good.
Yes, the answer, you can hire friends. All I would say is only hire friends if you've worked with them before. So someone as a friend is very different to someone as an employee. The manager team member relationship is very different to a friend-friend relationship. A friend-friend relationship is 2 ways. It's give and take. It's not transactional. It's based on love. If someone's going through a hard time, you're there for them no matter what. The manager-employee relationship is very different. It's one way. The manager really is there to support the employee, is there to train, to give, to be a leader to. And obviously we expect the work to be done, but we don't expect more in return. It's not like we don't expect them to love. And again, going back to, we don't expect them to care. I don't expect people to care as much about my business as I do. And so you can hire friends. I would say only hire them if you've worked with them before, because the worst thing that happens is you hire a friend and they're not very good at what they do. Yeah. That's difficult. So only hire a friend if you've worked with them before. Other than that, I would stay away from it. Or have a very clear agreement to say we're going to work together for 6 months. Yeah. And then after that, we'll review it, and these are the measurables, X, Y, and Z.
I feel like if you're going to do it, it's got to be approached with a lot of structure and caution and communication. I have never had it go dramatically wrong, but I have definitely now made a rule in my life that I don't work with my friends. And actually that is out of love for my friends. That is because I love them as my friends, and I don't have an interest in changing that relationship in a different capacity. Because as you said, it's a whole different dynamic, isn't it? So that's actually a really good almost rule of
And you need friends. You need someone to, you can't go to your employees and tell them really your fears about your business and your worries and stuff. You don't want them to be burdened with all that. But your friends, that's your people that you want to speak to about those things, and you want them to speak to you about the same. And so generally keep those relationships clear, but it can work well. If your friend is someone you've worked with before, or you have a really strong reference for their work, it can work incredibly well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place for us to kind of round that off. I guess as we close this episode, I mean, you've shared so much already, but I have no doubt there'll be people listening that suddenly feel that little bit more confident about stepping into that role as a manager within their businesses. Any final encouragements, parting words we want to leave people with?
It's always going to be messy. It's always going to feel like everything is stuck together with sticky tape and you're constantly fighting fires. It's just kind of settle in that and just know it's okay. Life is messy. Humans are emotional. We are not logical. We are feeling beings. And emotions can't be dealt with. It's not like a binary 1-0 number. That's not what human beings are. We are complex. We are emotional. Always going to be messy. You're never going to get it perfect. And just embrace that. And if you just commit to doing the best for people, doing the best for them, using your business as a vehicle to do the best for them, not being perfect, just growing, learning, you will be fine. You will already be a million miles ahead the majority of leaders out there.
I love that as a place to end. I'm all for the messy action. And so it's always a relief when we can apply that into other areas of being a business owner too. Heather, thank you so much, not just for your time and what you shared in this episode, but for your mission as a whole. As I shared at the top of this recording, it's so needed. It's something that supported me within my business. So thank you for what you do. There will be all of your links below for listeners to come and check out more and connect with your content. And yeah,
thank you.
Appreciate all your wisdom.
Absolute honour.